evening, I'm Nadia Jani and you're watching A News. Let's see your headlines. Trump is set to meet Putin in Alaska today in a push to end the war in Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine exchange prisoners of war ahead of the Trump-Putin summit. And Israeli minister announces plans for new West Bank settlement. The UN urges Tel Aviv to stop advancement. First this evening, all eyes will be on Friday's summit in Alaska later, as the high-level push for peace in Ukraine between the US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin happens at 11:30 p.m. local time. It'll be the first time the two leaders will have met in 6 years.
Security will be tight in Anchorage in Alaska as US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin prepare to meet Friday morning. It'll be the first time they've had face-to-face talks in 6 years. The main aim is for a breakthrough towards ending the war in Ukraine. The summit will be held at a secure US military base near the city and comes 1 week after Trump's deadline for Moscow to agree to a ceasefire or face new sanctions. While Kyiv and Moscow remain far apart after more than 3 years of war, Trump has expressed hope that his personal rapport with Putin could open the door to peace. Speaking to reporters on Thursday, Trump estimated there was a 25% chance the talks would fail, but insisted he believed Putin was ready to end the war. He suggested that any lasting peace would likely require a second round of talks, this time involving Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and possibly European leaders.
And I think President Putin will make peace. I think President Zelensky will make peace. We'll see if they can get along. And if they can, it'll be great.
Zelensky, who has been excluded from Friday's meeting, has warned that any agreement reached without Ukraine's participation would be meaningless. In recent days, he and his European allies have stepped up efforts to ensure Washington does not strike a deal with Moscow that could leave Ukraine exposed to future attacks. The summit's location has drawn a mix of journalists and summer tourists to Alaska, though the only visible signs of the high-profile meeting are the heightened security and influx of media crews. Putin, meanwhile, convened his top ministers and security officials ahead of the summit, underscoring the potential for the meeting to shape the endgame to the largest European conflict since the Second World War.
Protests and anticipation are building in Anchorage in Alaska as US President Donald Trump prepares to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin. Demonstrators voiced anger over Ukraine's exclusion, while some residents expressed cautious hope for peace.
Protesters took to the streets of Anchorage on Thursday ahead of Friday's summit between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. They voiced skepticism about the meeting and frustration over Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's absence. Hundreds called for support for Kyiv and condemned Russia's actions.
This is about Ukraine. It's not about America, and it's not about Russia, really, except that Russia invaded Ukraine, and they need to leave. There's nothing to negotiate. I mean, what should Zelensky do in return? He just wants to reaffirm his borders, and the fact that he's not here is just colonialism, all over again.
I don't really have much hope for the summit tomorrow. It would be nice to think that Putin would recognize that he's not going to win, but my understanding is that he would lose his grasp on power if he stops the war.
While many protesters voiced anger and skepticism, some local residents expressed cautious optimism about the leaders' meeting.
I think it's great. I mean, Alaska is very vital to the United States, and it's a prominent state for, the red state, as you could say. Trump is a big, factor here, and I think it'd be great for us to have it here, yeah.
Yeah, you know, I heard about it's something to go with the Ukrainian war. So, you know, I hope peace goes out. You know, we don't want another war.
Yeah.
So, you know, just all love. I like what Trump is doing, trying to get peace, but it could get very dangerous. But you know, really looking forward to it.
The meeting is scheduled to take place at 11:30 local time. That's 19:30 Greenwich Mean Time.
In Kharkiv, air raid sirens sound several times a day, a stark reminder that despite political talks, life for Ukrainians remains unchanged. On the front line, shortages of weapons, ammunition and troops are growing. Kyiv warns that any pause in Western aid will give Russia time to fortify its positions and make the war even harder to win. A News is reporting live from Ukraine.
Being here in Kharkiv, right in front of Держпром, from where the whole city is hearing air alerts several times per day, we can clearly say that meetings on political front have not so much effect on the regular life of citizens in Ukraine. But apart from the citizens themselves, we have been meeting with people from military, with officials, and all of them say the same. They do not trust Russia, they do not trust Kremlin, and they do not trust any kind of agreement which will be signed without Ukraine participating. First of all, Ukraine is largely skeptical about Russia's so-called goodwill to end the war, and they think that any kind of initiative coming from Moscow is just another trick aimed at prolonging the status quo and legalizing the occupation which is at land. At the same time, seeing the military people and being in the front line on Kharkiv, we were able to tell that Ukraine military is in need of European aid, of American aid. There is shortage of weaponry, there is shortage of people, and there is shortage of munition. And every time the US or Europe is taking a break in military aid to Ukraine for another meeting with Russia, Ukraine is suffering on the front line. Ukraine is suffering on the battleground. Many months ago, when US stopped their military aid to Ukraine to just review their stance on the war, Vovchansk direction was heavily suffering. Kyiv had heavy losses in that direction and lost some territories. And those losses are still visible. When you visit the front line, you can see the results of that break. And yet another pause in military aid, yet another pause in financial aid, it will be very difficult for Kyiv to proceed. And with each lost day, Russia is fortifying its positions. Russia is bringing more people, more weaponry, more drones, more munition, and it's becoming growingly difficult for people on ground to withstand that.
Meanwhile, Russia and Ukraine have carried out their latest prisoner exchange, each side releasing 84 soldiers in a deal brokered by the United Arab Emirates. Footage released by the Russian Defense Ministry shows freed Russian troops cheering and boarding buses in Belarus, where they receive medical and psychological care before returning home. Kyiv soldiers were also handed back under the agreement. The UAE played a key role in mediating the exchange, though details of the negotiations were not disclosed. Over to Israel, and the finance minister has announced a major settlement plan expansion in the West Bank in a move that could cut the territory in two. The E1 settlement plan, which has been frozen for decades under global pressure, is being revived, despite warnings it will destroy any prospect of a Palestinian state.
Israel's finance minister Bezalel Smotrich stood in the settlement of Ma'ale Adumim to declare what he called a historic breakthrough, the revival of the E1 settlement project. If built, it would link Ma'ale Adumim to Jerusalem, effectively cutting the West Bank into two separate areas.
Whoever in the world is trying to recognize a Palestinian state today will receive our answer on the ground, not with documents nor with decisions or statements, but with facts. facts of houses, facts of neighborhoods, roads, and of more and more Jewish families building lives. They will speak of the false Palestinian dream. We will continue to build a fulfilling Jewish reality. This reality definitively buries the idea of a Palestinian state, simply because there is nothing to recognize and no one to recognize.
The E1 plan has been frozen since 2012, under pressure from the United States, the European Union and the United Nations, who view Israeli settlements in the West Bank as illegal under international law.
Smotrich's celebration of the killing of the potential of a Palestinian state is actually a celebration of the killing of the future of Israel. We all know today that the only way to have peace and to even defeat Hamas is by having a Palestinian state side by side with Israel.
The UN and rights group say that building E1 would not only violate the Fourth Geneva Convention, but also create a physical barrier to a viable Palestinian state, undermining decades of internationally backed peace efforts. Smotrich insists that the plan has full support from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and US President Donald Trump, though neither has confirmed this publicly.
Everything I do in the Judea and Samaria is being done in full coordination with Netanyahu and with his blessing, and with our friends in the White House, with President Trump, with his team.
Palestinian leaders condemned the move, with the Foreign Ministry calling it part of a systemic policy of annexation and displacement.
The American administration should put enough pressure on the Israelis to stop this provocation, this illegal decisions and proposals, and we hope that the world community will never allow Israel to force its laws on the Palestinian land.
The E1 development is expected to receive final approval next week. Its revival comes as several European nations prepare to formally recognize a Palestinian state in September.
Meanwhile, the United Nations has urged Israel to reverse its plan to revive the long-delayed E1 settlement project in the West Bank, warning it would effectively destroy any two-state solution. UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric said such settlements go against international law and further set the occupation. Construction in the E1 area would sever the northern and southern West Bank, severely undermining the prospects for the realization of a viable bordering Palestinian state.
West Bank, including East.
Now to a short break, but we'll be back to discuss the Alaska meeting with the US and Russia. Stay tuned.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome back to A News. Let's begin to take a closer look at the meeting with US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin later this evening, and whether both leaders can successfully end the war in Ukraine. I'm now joined to discuss this in further detail by Anna Evans, a political analyst in Lisbon. Hello.
Hello, Nadia.
Hi. So my first question is, Trump is making his way to Alaska, and he believes that Putin will make a deal. How likely is that?
Well, I would say that this meeting has several goals for both political leaders. So for President Trump, it is a meeting where he can redesign relations between the United States and Russia, and at the same time negotiate some future perspectives for the Ukraine conflict. So I would say there are two sides of the negotiation bargain. One side is the US interests with regard to Russia, so a bilateral negotiation. The other side is preparing the future of peace negotiations in Ukraine. And so both political leaders have gains at the domestic level, gains to show to their domestic audience. And I would not say that it is a win-lose situation. They both can win. It can be a win-win result out of this meeting. But we need to separate what are the bilateral US-Russia interests and the other issue, which is the Ukraine issue. And so, for example, with regards to the bilateral interests, we know that the United States is specifically very concerned with critical raw materials and with the possibility that both countries share some interests with regard to critical raw materials, their exploitation both in Alaska and in the strait between Alaska and Russia. And this is a trade aspect, a bilateral trade aspect. Another aspect of US-Russia relationships is the renegotiation of the nuclear treaty, which will close up in a few months. And then a third stake is the Ukraine issue. And in the Ukraine issue, Putin has showed himself to be extremely irreducible, so he does not want to make concessions, but neither do Ukrainians or Europeans want to do concessions. And so the issue is that it is possible that President Trump might use some benefits that Russia could get outside of the war context to convince President Putin to make some concessions. So it is indeed a duetto, not a win-lose situation.
Right, so it sounds like both parties have got something to gain out of these talks that's happening this evening. My next question is, Trump seems very excited about the meeting with Putin later today, but Zelensky claims that he is being deceived by Putin, who is not in it for the right reasons. Who do you think is right?
Well, that President Trump is not easily deceived. He has indeed changed posture with regard to the Ukraine-Russian conflict or Russian-Ukraine conflict since the beginning of his mandate. But the fact that he has changed narrative or tactics of negotiation does not mean that President Trump has been fooled or tricked. it means that President Trump tried a different strategy from the one that President Biden had tried, and it is legitimate to try different diplomatic strategies, some more coercive, others more transactional. But the fact is that after trying a more transactional or a more cooperative approach since the beginning of his mandate, then President Trump realized that this new kind of strategy was not really resulting in beneficial terms, and Russia remained, the Russian administration remained as always with regard to its war goals. And so it is natural that now President Trump adjusts the strategy and tries a different approach, but that does not mean that he's being fooled. I think President Trump has shown with the Azerbaijan-Armenian memorandum and the possibility of a US lease for 99 years of that 43-kilometer passage that connects Azerbaijan with its exclave and then so on in geographic terms. I think President Trump has shown he knows very well how to play against China, Russia, and Iran. And so I wouldn't say he can be very easily fooled.
And do you think that it's more likely that a deal may have to include Ukraine losing some of its territory?
Well, unfortunately for Ukraine, it is not likely. After the invader lost so many people, so many soldiers died already and others are injured. And so there are so many casualties. And so it would be unthinkable that without a war capitulation, without an outright defeat, the Russian president would go back home and say, we lost so many men, we lost so many billions, but, they can keep the lands. So I think, unfortunately, we know from history that unless there is military capitulation outright, then there will need to be concessions. Now, the issue is that there are also concessions that can be negotiated outside of the realm of land. And so the land swaps are not necessarily the only concessions. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the fact that President Trump is negotiating on other items, trade items, the possibility also of reducing sanctions and also the nuclear deal and, looking at what happened with Azerbaijan and Armenia, there are third parties and third regional areas that can be part of negotiations, and not only just those lands that are at stake. But obviously, in the domestic narrative, President Putin will always have to say that he got a great deal. Otherwise, he will risk his own regime.
And do you think that this is a step for Putin in the right direction, to be seen as a leader that is cooperating on the global stage by, attending these meetings with President Donald Trump?
Well, Nadia, I think the perspectives on President Putin depend on who is looking at him. So if we look at the global South, the leaders of the global South were present in that big military parade that President Putin organized. And so we saw the Brazilian president Lula, we saw other Latin American presidents, we saw the Chinese president. So we see presidents that are aligned in political terms and who have very specific economic interests vis-à-vis Russia and China. Let us not forget that Russia is the minor partner of an alignment of interests with a big dragon, which is China. And so, looking from the perspective of the global south and the BRICS, you know, Brazil, Russia, of course, India, China, and South Africa, if we look from those perspectives, President Putin is a cooperative person, and he can generously play with benefits and being economic, trade, or military with these countries. Oh, Iran is another example. Turkey has balanced views. So the perspective of who President Putin is in the eye of the beholder and not really in what President Putin does or does not. I would put it that way.
Okay, and both Putin and the Kremlin, the spokesperson, have suggested that, as you mentioned, the several different topics will be discussed with Donald Trump. Do you think the Russians are trying to sideline the Ukrainian issue?
Well, it is very clear that both parties, President Putin and also President Trump, but mostly President Putin, were interested in having a bilateral talk. Because, as I say, there are very important issues that are really not a Ukrainian business. They are issues between the United States and Russia, and these issues need to be discussed bilaterally. Also, President Trump was walking on a very fine line because President Trump had promised in a diplomatic coercive move that he would enforce secondary sanctions and an attempt to dismantle the shadow fleet of Russia if Russia didn't comply with a ceasefire negotiation very quickly. So he first gave Russia 50 days, then President Trump decreased the period, and the period finalized this week. And so the problem is that President Trump knew that it would be so hard to implement the coercive measures he promised, and the ultimatum was finishing. So President Trump needed this meeting to make time, to gain time to solve this diplomatic hurdle that his ultimatum did not really work. And he couldn't go, and tell his domestic audience and international partners, oh, I'm a weak leader and my ultimatum didn't work. And so this is a really important meeting politically. And no matter what the result is, that is, I think, it's number one reason that President Trump needed this meeting, because, his implementation of taxes on India, which, as we know, is a major oil consumer from Russia, his implementation of taxes, special tariffs, did not go very well in the past few days. And so President Trump needed an escape out of his failed ultimatum. And this meeting provides that escape and provides a forum of negotiation on a number of issues that are on his geopolitical plate.
Okay, thank you so much for joining me, Anna. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia.
After the break, we'll look at the key stories shaping the region. See you soon.
city to be newest, coolest, sexiest new resort city in the world. And that's my goal. If you want to develop tourism in any country, it's going to be much easier to do it if you have casinos as part of your entertainment industry. Our casino will be the largest in Europe and 5th largest in the world.
Welcome to Dream Fest Training 25. Are you ready?
Let's go! It's on my mind. It's in my heart. Baku! We'll be ready when the curtain falls. Feel my heart beating when the crowd calls.
Every year we keep waiting for this festival.
Because it has a pure energy.
First time performing in my country, I feel amazing.
I've been coming here the last 25 years. It's just wow.
I love the city, I like the people.
I'm so happy to be here.
When I come on the stage, they will have to dance.
There's a lot of cool stuff that's been done. We're going to have an amazing show. Welcome to Azerbaijan. Welcome to Seabreeze.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Welcome back to A News. We're going to take a closer look at the Azerbaijan-Armenia peace deal. The US brokered peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia is going to open up new political and economic opportunities in the South Caucasus. Both leaders say their neighbors will benefit.
Nations on trade, and I said, I'm not.
The leaders of Azerbaijan and Armenia have said that they are not concerned about potential reactions from Iran and Russia following the US-mediated peace agreement. They believe the deal, that was initiated at summit in Washington on the 8th of August, will create new economic and political opportunities in the region while providing strategic advantages to neighboring countries. In exclusive interviews with Fox News, Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev praised US President Donald Trump and his envoy for their role in brokering the agreement last week. President Aliyev said there is no reason for any country to view the deal negatively. He said that today we have taken the final step towards peace. He also noted that the Zangezur corridor is not directed against any country and will become an important part of international transport routes. Pashinyan added that the agreement offers tangible benefits for Iran and Russia, including a railway link from the Persian Gulf to the Black Sea. The core element of the agreement is the 27-mile Trump route for international peace and prosperity transit corridor. The route will connect mainland Azerbaijan with its Nakhchivan exclave, passing through Armenian territory. Armenia has granted the US exclusive development rights for the corridor and related infrastructure for 99 years, covering roads, railways, pipelines, fiber optic lines, and power transmission networks. Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs described the deal as positive, expressing hope for stability in the South Caucasus. At the same time, Moscow stressed caution regarding foreign involvement and highlighted the importance of including neighbors such as Russia, Iran, and Turkey in regional solutions. Iran's foreign ministry also welcomed the Washington agreement as an important step toward lasting regional peace, but warned against any foreign intervention near its borders that could undermine the region's security and lasting stability.
Azerbaijan has dispatched a new humanitarian aid shipment to Ukraine. The aid is valued at $2 million and aims to help restore electricity in Ukraine's war-damaged regions. In total, the convoy of 19 trucks have been sent to Ukraine this week.
Azerbaijan is sending the second batch of humanitarian aid to Ukraine following President Ilham Aliyev's order on 11th August. The shipment, consisting of electrical equipment, is leaving Sumgay Technology Park. According to Jahid Mikhailov, head of the press section of the Ministry of Energy, the aid includes electrical cables and wires, as well as generators and transformer sets. The ambassador of Ukraine, Yuri Husev, that day expressed his gratitude to the president, the government and the people of Azerbaijan for their solidarity and friendly support during this difficult time for Ukraine. The first batch, a convoy of 10 trucks, was sent 2 days ago. This latest convoy of 9 trucks is part of a broader $2 million package requested by Ukraine to help restore stable electricity supply in areas damaged by the ongoing war. Azerbaijan has previously provided similar assistance, and with this delivery, its total humanitarian support to Ukraine, including aid for reconstruction and restoration, has surpassed $44 million.
Georgia's foreign trade has hit new highs. Government data shows record-breaking exports and trade turnover in the first 7 months of 2025, continuing the upward trend since last year. The ministry economy says exports rose nearly 9% to more than $3.8 billion, the highest on record. Imports climbed almost 11% to just above $10.3 billion, though July saw a drop of nearly 7% from previous months. Total trade turnover grew by more than 10% to around $14.1 billion, also a record. Romania is calling for its Black Sea security partnership with Turkey and Bulgaria to expand a joint task force that clears the mines in its waters. The defense minister says patrols are needed to protect vital trade routes and energy infrastructure from possible Russian threats.
Romania says NATO allies Turkey and Bulgaria should broaden their Black Sea task force to include regular patrols, building on current mine-clearing operations. Romanian Defense Minister says the expanded mission would safeguard energy facilities, shipping lanes, and freedom of navigation.
We have joint projects with Turkey and Bulgaria. For example, now we have a project to demine the Black Sea. We work very well together with the Bulgarian and Turkish allies. And this project will have to be expanded to a patrol project in the coming years. We have to stay connected because everything that will happen in the Black Sea must be done jointly with our allies.
Formed last year, the three-nation force was created to deal with drifting sea mines, a persistent hazard since Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. Several commercial ships carrying grain and oil have been damaged in the region. Romania shares a 650-kilometer land border with Ukraine and has reported Russian drone fragments falling on its territory during the war. In the Black Sea, Mosteanu cited near-daily attempts to jam GPS signals, which Romania blames on Russia. Romania is also preparing to become the EU's largest gas producer by 2027 with an offshore Black Sea project that will make it a net exporter.
The US State Department has accused Kabul of widespread human rights violations, particularly targeting women and girls in its annual human rights report. Our correspondent, Tamim Bahis, has more from Kabul.
According to the report, edicts issued in 2024 further restricted women's and girls' access to education, employment and freedom of movement, effectively removing them from public spaces and diminishing fundamental civil and political rights. These measures, the State Department says, mark a significant deterioration in the situation. Meanwhile, the United Nations and several international human rights organizations have documented similar patterns. Bans on secondary and university education for females, restriction on public spaces, harsh dress code enforcement, and forced expulsion from media and NGO sectors. In particular, women and girls remain the most severely affected. The Taliban continue to limit their education, ban them from many workplaces, including healthcare training, and severely curtail their mobility and basic freedoms. A News reached out to the Afghan Foreign Ministry for comment, but no response has been received. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
After the break, we'll be taking a closer look at the European Parliament, welcoming the recent progress in the Armenia-Azerbaijan peace process. Stay tuned.
Join me, Nick Summerby, on A News. From my days playing in the Premier League to working as a broadcaster for the channels like Al Jazeera and beIN Sports.
This is Summerby, a glorious
I've never been afraid to ask the tough questions, to find out what's really going on behind the scenes of the world's biggest sports teams. We'll be taking you inside the latest stories, stats and dressing room secrets of the world's biggest teams.
We are here in the Turkish capital of Ankara, a city of policymakers, diplomats and 250,000 university students.
And we're partnering with Ankara Yildirim Beyazıt University, speaking to 3 leading professors from the areas of law, diplomacy and international relations.
Exploring how and why the very fundamentals of diplomacy are being transformed.
Everything is faster, everything is more efficient, and everything is more effective now. Carry on this idea that there is more to share than fight for.
Why diplomacy is needed? It's the language of peace. That's why it creates trust between the nations. Arts and sciences has a profound way for enhancing, for fueling the cultural diplomacy.
In this technopolar world, are nation states, organizations, world leaders arguing more?
Because of the extraterritorial application of those technology, there is no single authority in this game.
And of course, as always on A News Talk, speaking to an amazing group of students.
So join us for what promises to be an insightful conversation which will be broadcast across all A News platforms.
Hello, I'm Orkun Amashov. Welcome to Dialogue of Civilizations. No man is an island entire of itself. Our true connections as species go far beyond digital technology. In this exciting new series, I'll be exploring a vast and fascinating history of connections between civilizations and revealing secret bonds that have helped societies, cultures and religions peacefully coexist. Join me and let's explore together.
Welcome back to A News. We will now discuss what the European Parliament has praised as a positive step in the right direction to the relation with Armenia and Azerbaijan peace process and the joint declaration signed in Washington a week today. Joining me to dig into this a bit deeper is political analyst Mr. Klaus Jurgens. Good evening.
Hello, good evening to you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. My first question to you is how significant is the European Parliament's support with all of this alongside the peace agreement that they signed last week?
Well, I have to be very brief. I could probably write a couple of books about this, having followed the Armenian lobby activities from Brussels to Berlin and back to Brussels for many years. But now, in the wake of the meeting between the presidents and President Trump, I think it would be not the time to look back into the past, but to look ahead. Now, this was my first point. Secondly, I'm very happy that the European Parliament, as well as the European Commission President and the European Council President, have welcomed the agreement without putting any further constraints, except for saying basically we wanted to succeed. And 10%, a little bit ironically, I said better late than never. I quote from the text issued by the European Union, culminating years of EU efforts. Well, apparently Donald Trump was slightly faster, and I think this underlines the EU's soul searching. But let us not forget, peace in the Southern Caucasus, peace in the entire region, would not be long-lasting without the full support of the European Union, its individual member states, plus the United Kingdom. So very welcome what emanated from the European Union, better late than never. And I think this is something to build on. This is something to build on, that unfair criticism towards, in particular, the Republic of Azerbaijan comes to an end. No one is whitewashing or gold-plating anyone. As I've said, the past is the past, bygone is bygone. Everyone has to look ahead. And as I've said, this time I'm rather optimistic. Brussels has woken up. It's a new geopolitical reality. Armenia and Azerbaijan did all the hard work, and then Donald Trump, positively speaking, finished it off. And of course, the EU soul-searching, they can't just stay on the sidelines. But it's huge. It's huge good news for the EU too.
And what impact could this backing have on the implementation of the Washington declared treaty?
I think it will have a huge impact. As I said, bygone is bygone. Now, Armenia and Azerbaijan will actually say, look, we don't have to defend ourselves anymore as single nation state players. Now all of a sudden we work as a team. And this team will actually revolutionize, positively speaking, the entire Southern Caucasus. And you've mentioned Georgia in one of your previous clips. I would almost go so far to say that learning from the EU this time, with all its faults, you know, my slight criticism sometimes, I discreetly mentioned once, why not have the Southern Caucasus internal market fashioned alongside the bigger European Union internal market for people, goods, trade, and services? Why not bring the peoples closer together by actually meeting, working together, studying, and what have you? Trade will be the first, of course, the economy, after peace has been established. But think about the enormous potential. It could become a kind of motivator, not only for this region, but for other regions around the world. How can we end conflict? And what will happen afterwards? Will we continue to look at each other negatively, or will we say, no, the time is over, we cooperate now? A small internal market in the Southern Caucasus, why not?
And how can we assess the willingness of both Armenia and Azerbaijan to move from these agreements to concrete actions?
Well, Yes, of course. I must be very careful not to come back what I said 1 or 2 years when the situation was still slightly different. I think both sides still have a certain give and take, checks and balances. As most commentators would agree, the actual implementation of what was done in Washington will not happen, probably not before the upcoming elections in Armenia. And the Sangasur corridor is or Donald Trump's peace and prosperity, corridor, whatever the name will be, is of course of vital importance to this. The Constitution still has to be amended, which is part of the initialing of the agreement signed in the US. And only yesterday I was alerted to the point. I think I should make it here. Why not? But please correct me if I'm wrong. His Excellency President Aliyev said that the organization of the Western Azerbaijani community will be disbanded, if I'm not wrong. This was making the headlines yesterday on behalf of a number of your news outlets. As I said, I could not verify today. In parts of Europe, it's a holiday today. Very few government agencies would open, including your own country. Now, let me put it like this. I always defended the right to return. And I said, yes, a peaceful right to return is a human right. I actually helped the Air Center, with my modest insight, to compile a small publication about the subject. And I'm still, or was, an honorary member of the Western Azerbaijani community. A great, great honor. But the times are changing. And perhaps this is a sign that Azerbaijan once more goes the first step and gives Armenia now the chance to do exactly the same required measures within the next 12 months. And last not least, if I still have half a minute, it was told to me by the Zain Hajiev some time ago, and I have the script of his speech. Your government rightly complained that the Armenian side did not issue the correct maps with the remaining landmines. And this, of course, made the situation unbearable. But now we have two options, and let me be very positively speaking clear about it. Yes, whilst bygone is bygone, the past should not be completely forgotten, and both sides still have to do a little bit of homework. And I think, as I've said, if the news are correct, what was issued yesterday or the day before is one step to let the Armenian side understand that territorial integrity will never be challenged from Azerbaijan. And Azerbaijan will make clear to Armenia that Azerbaijani territorial integrity will never be challenged from the side of Armenia. This is the basis for lasting peace.
And what role do you think the EU can play in monitoring or facilitating the treaty's implementation?
Absolutely. Let me go back 2 years, an event in Brussels. European Parliament, and it's all on the record, and run by the European Parliament and your fine embassies for Brussels and Benelux in Brussels. And of course, the usual criticism came automatically. Well, what can Azerbaijan actually do, and this and this and that? And then some of the commentators, I had the honor to moderate that panel, actually said, look, sometimes you have to give your opposing numbers some food for thought. And COP29 was already almost on the cards, or basically on the cards. And we discreetly mentioned, look, green, clean energy, this is something the Europeans and climate change are so interested in. Why not let Azerbaijan become a role model in this regard? COP29 happened, and the rest is history. So this convinced me 2 years ago in Brussels to say, look, proactive lobbying is possible. Azerbaijan started a very, very, very proactive lobbying campaign to stem the tide of disinformation from the side of Armenia and some other European lobbyists, perhaps, and Washington too. But then the two sides realized, look, forget about the outside world. We need a mediator, we need Washington, we need Brussels. But first of all, we too, Armenia and Azerbaijan, have to agree that we actually want peace. and stability in the region. And this is, I think, how this landmark deal, even if Donald Trump now managed to do it, the deal would not have happened without Armenia and Azerbaijan agreeing to it. So that is the positive news. Now, Brussels will pick up on it. And I think the biggest thing, the most positive idea Brussels can contribute is to tell Armenia and Azerbaijan, look, we've learned our lesson. What can we still help you to make your societies even better? Is it about education? Is it about social welfare? Is it about international trade, international relations? How can we help? And Brussels has the expertise. And don't get me wrong, Brussels is much closer to the region than Washington is. So yes, I would really hope that there is a positive impact from the side of Brussels. And don't forget, the key players are still Paris and Berlin. And the German president some while ago visited both Armenia and your nation. And I covered the story, and the colleagues covered it. And the resonance in Germany was very, very positive, as if, hey, we are rediscovering a region we did not really understand. Yes, the leverage from Brussels would be very welcome.
And very, very quickly, how might regional powers respond to European Parliament's endorsement of the peace process? If you can just summarise that quickly for me.
Okay, half a minute. I hope we can see it. This is a document from your Ministry of Economy, 2020, when the Sangazur corridor was first coming to our attention, to the attention. And on this map, I'm sorry to show, I have to be very brief, of course. On this map, there is a connection between the Sangazur corridor leading straight to Tehran. And I think this is what the Iranian side want to see, that Iran is not sidelined. Next step, Georgia. Of course, then we already have alleviated huge troubles which can arise. And then one day, even Moscow will come to the realization that peace in the Caucasus is a new geopolitical factor, and it doesn't threaten Moscow's existence. Far from it. It could actually help to portray Moscow in a totally different light by supporting peaceful developments, and that would be highly appreciated. Yes, I still think Trump's or the Sangazur corridor absolutely vital, but it's not the only item on the agenda.
Thank you so much for joining me this evening, Mr. Jurgens. Thank you.
Pleasure.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned to A News.